History keeps its loudest battles in plain sight, but its darkest wars are buried in sealed vaults, erased ledgers, and the quiet spaces between official lines. Here lie operations no map dares to mark, where men vanished without a trace, machines whispered in the dark, and truth was traded like contraband. Step too close, and you'll feel it, the pulse of secrets still guarded by shadows older than the peace we claim to keep. On April 17, 1945, with the Red Army closing on Berlin from the east and Allied forces advancing from the west, an unmarked convoy of 6 heavy trucks and 2 SD. KFZ. 251 half-tracks departed the Reich Chancellery compound under the cover of a rainstorm. According to fragmentary Wehrmacht traffic logs preserved in the Bundesarchiv, the column was designated Projekt Morgenstern, a code name absent from any known military development list. Its escort, men from the 500th SS Parachute Battalion, carried orders signed by Reich Security Main Office Section 6, Foreign Intelligence, indicating a scientific relocation to Oberharz. Soviet forward reconnaissance units reported sighting the convoy near the town of Halberstadt on the evening of the 18th. Within hours, it disappeared into the network of tunnels beneath the Harz Mountains, many of which had been expanded into armament factories under the Mittelwerk complex. These same tunnels had produced the V-2 rocket under the supervision of the SS and drew labor from the Dora Mittelbau concentration camp. Surviving testimony from camp inmates collected in 1946 mentions a black convoy entering an unregistered tunnel shaft, its crates marked with electrical hazard symbols and stenciled codes beginning with PW-57. Allied intelligence first learned of Morgenstern through a series of intercepted Soviet NKVD cables in May 1945. The decrypted traffic, found in the British National Archives under file FO371/50823, described Soviet engineering teams encountering sealed subterranean sections with residual electrical discharges in the Oberharz area. The cables note the unexplained failure of Geiger counters and magnetic compasses near certain shafts. In one entry, dated May 27, a Soviet major reported an unrecoverable loss of personnel during an attempted breach, with no elaboration beyond a reference to instantaneous atmospheric ignition. By mid-June, U.S. Army Counterintelligence Corps (CIC) detachments operating in the British zone had begun their own quiet investigation. Captain Harold A. Fenwick's debriefing notes, declassified in 1993, refer to recovered documents from a bombed Berlin ministry that link Morgenstern to a Pulsewellen apparat, pulse wave apparatus, described as capable of disabling ignition systems and communications over extensive radii. The file contains no technical diagrams, only procurement orders for copper coils, oscillators, and high-voltage capacitors, some requisitioned from AEG factories. No physical trace of the convoy was recovered. In August 1945, British Royal Engineers conducted controlled demolitions to seal the most dangerous tunnel networks in the Harz, officially citing structural instability. Internal War Office memos, however, acknowledged the decision was partly to deny further exploitation by Soviet scientific units. The only post-war lead emerged in 1958, when a retired Polish liaison officer, Colonel Janusz Kroll, contacted a British journalist with claims that elements of Morgenstern equipment had been relocated to a Soviet research facility near Gorky. He described visiting a hangar, filled with cables humming with residual current, and a steel crate stamped with the eagle and swastika over the letters PW. Kroll died in a road accident in Warsaw 2 months later. No inquest was held. In 1974, an unexplained power surge affected sections of East Germany's 220 kV grid, centered near the former Mittelwerk region. East German press attributed it to transformer failure, yet a Stasi technical report, leaked in the 1990s, records shortwave anomalies consistent with high-energy pulse discharge detected across amateur radio frequencies in the vicinity. The report's final page is missing. Today, Projekt Morgenstern remains an anomaly in the annals of wartime research. It is absent from Speer's production lists, unmentioned in Allied post-war technical interrogations, and invisible in Soviet military science journals. Yet in the Harz Mountains, sealed shafts still mark the landscape, their entrances overgrown but surrounded by rusting perimeter wire. Local hikers speak of static building in their hair near certain hillsides, and compasses that drift without magnetic cause. Officially, These are geological curiosities. Unofficially, they are all that remain of a convoy whose cargo may have been decades ahead of its time, and whose disappearance still shadows the margins of history. In the spring of 1952, a thin bundle of partially declassified CIA papers surfaced under the innocuous title, Field Communications, Western Hemisphere. Buried in the pages was a single reference to Operation Rook, an internal counterintelligence initiative aimed at locating former Wehrmacht cryptographers suspected of passing intercepted NATO signals to hostile actors. The cover narrative pointed toward Buenos Aires, where a network of émigré German officers was already under routine surveillance. But an anomaly in the SIGINT records redirected attention far from South America. The anomaly originated in March 1952 from an abandoned Kriegsmarine U-boat facility on the coast of Norway, near the town of Fej. Officially, the base, known in wartime as Unrecovered Nordstern, had been stripped of military value by the British Royal Navy in 1946. Yet intercepted bursts of narrowband transmission, lasting less than 8 seconds each, were triangulated to within 100 meters of the disused dock tunnel. The signals, when run through contemporary cryptographic analysis, proved to be written in the obsolete Schlüssel M cipher, a system last used operationally by the Kriegsmarine in April 1945. The CIA, then still consolidating its post-war operations in Europe, assigned the matter to a joint field detachment with British SIS support. Field Officer Leonard K. Doerr's operational diary, parts of which were declassified in 2004, details the arrival of 2 naval combat divers, both veterans of clandestine clearance dives in the Baltic. On the night of May 11th, they entered the submerged entrance to Unrecovered Nordstern under total blackout conditions. According to Doerr's final entry before the mission ceased, the divers reported a steel partition beyond original wartime schematics, and an inner bulkhead electrified at dangerous load. Communications from the divers abruptly ended at 2:46. A single sonar ping from the surface team was returned, followed by silence. The divers did not resurface. At first light, a surface sweep of the tunnel revealed scorch marks on the inner bulkhead and fragments of copper wiring, fused into distorted loops. The site was sealed by placing demolition charges at the tunnel mouth. The official report lists the cause as catastrophic roof collapse. 3 weeks later, a new series of transmissions emerged, not from Norway, but from a merchant ship registered in Lisbon and docked at Casablanca. The encryption key matched the final sequence intercepted from Unrecovered Nordstern. Within hours, the ship's manifest and crew list were confiscated under diplomatic seal. No public mention of its cargo or voyage appeared in Portuguese or Moroccan press. A decade later, in 1963, a defector from East Germany's Hauptverwaltung Aufklärung claimed during CIA debriefing that the Fej facility had concealed a sealed archive chamber containing signal intelligence from late 1944, intercepts the Soviets considered invaluable for reverse engineering Allied communications protocols. According to the defector, the chamber had been booby-trapped with high-voltage capacitors, designed to destroy both the occupants and the equipment upon forced entry. His account aligns with Doerr's description of the electrified bulkhead, though no physical confirmation exists. The surviving operational files for Rook are heavily redacted. One unredacted margin note, written in a different hand than the main text, reads, "Not Argentina. Not any longer. Moved offshore. Probably lost for good." What precisely was moved remains unstated. The fate of the missing divers, and whether the transmissions were automated or manually sent, has never been resolved. Today, the tunnel's entrance lies collapsed beneath 40 meters of seawater, its position absent from official Norwegian hydrographic maps. Amateur divers report unstable currents and unexplained electromagnetic interference in the surrounding bay. Local fishermen still avoid setting nets within a half-kilometer radius, citing old mines as the reason. None mention the occasional echoing pulse, too regular for sonar drift, that some say can still be heard on calm nights, rolling up from the depths where Unrecovered Nordstern once stood. On the night of January 4, 1946, an RAF Lancaster transport aircraft, serial number TW-897, departed the Royal Air Force Base at Fassberg in the British zone of occupied Germany. Its official manifest listed humanitarian supplies bound for Udine, Italy, as part of post-war relief efforts. Unofficial records recovered decades later suggest the cargo was far from ordinary. Sealed steel crates containing the only surviving components of Gerät 57, a classified propulsion system dismantled from the subterranean facilities at Piemont before Soviet forces arrived. The Lancaster's route took it over the Austrian-Italian border at high altitude, avoiding still unstable air corridors where partisan activity remained common. At 2342, Italian air traffic control in Bolzano recorded its last confirmed position, 30 kilometers northwest of the town of Tolmezzo, flying in deteriorating winter conditions. Minutes later, villagers in the Carnic Alps reported hearing an unbroken mechanical roar, followed by a muted impact somewhere in the snowbound mountains. No distress call was received. British search and rescue teams dispatched from Udine reached the suspected crash zone 5 days later, slowed by deep snow and avalanche risk. By then, locals reported that military trucks, unmarked and without visible unit insignia, had been operating in the area under heavy floodlights. These vehicles were last seen traveling south in convoy before dawn on January 6. No official record of their presence exists in Allied occupation logs. The subsequent RAF crash investigation, designated Report AC/46/131, was classified top secret and remains partially redacted to this day. Its surviving sections mention discrepancies in debris pattern and absence of primary wreckage. No human remains from the crew of 7 were recovered, and the aircraft's 4 Rolls-Royce Merlin engines were unaccounted for in the wreck inventory. Italian Alpine police archives hold a brief, handwritten report from a patrol sergeant who claimed to have seen 4 large metallic cylinders, each on a flatbed lorry, steaming in the cold air. His superior's endorsement stamp on the document is dated January 7, 2 days after British search teams were supposedly still en route. A year later, in early 1947, a classified technical bulletin from the U.S. Army Air Force's Scientific Advisory Group surfaced in War Department correspondence. It refers cryptically to Propulsive Test Data, Piemont Series, archived under 57/B schema, location undisclosed. The schema matches wartime designations found in captured German documentation for advanced ramjet and pulse detonation engines. The mystery deepened in 1954 when a retired Italian engineer, formerly employed at the Region Aircraft Works, described to a journalist a post-war meeting with Anglo-American officers seeking manufacturing tolerances for high-heat alloys. The engineer claimed the officers hinted at a propulsion system not for conventional aircraft, using phrasing identical to German patents filed in 1944 under SS funding. His statement never appeared in print. The journalist's notes were confiscated in a police raid weeks later, reportedly at the request of NATO intelligence. Alpine residents have long whispered about the humming that lingered for weeks after the incident. Shepherds in the high pastures spoke of faint vibrations underfoot, like the passage of distant machinery, felt most strongly near a certain ridge north of Tolmezzo. In the 1980s, an Italian amateur radio enthusiast recorded bursts of narrowband transmission on frequencies unused since the war, each lasting less than 2 seconds and repeating every 48 hours. The signals ceased abruptly after he published his findings in a local newsletter. Officially, TW-897's disappearance remains chalked up to severe weather and navigational error. Unofficially, Gerät 57 occupies a peculiar place in the margins of aerospace history. Never confirmed, never debunked, and conspicuously absent from post-war German scientist interrogations. Whether the propulsion system was destroyed, hidden, or integrated into early Cold War black projects remains unknown. What is certain is that somewhere in the Carnic Alps, the wreckage of the Lancaster has never been found, and the snow still covers more than just the traces of that winter night. In October 1944, as the Red Army pressed westward through the ruins of Operation Bagration, Soviet High Command authorized a deep reconnaissance push beyond Smolensk. The mission, recorded in fragmentary orders preserved in the central archives of the Russian Ministry of Defense, tasked the 32nd Independent Reconnaissance Battalion with intercepting a German armored train reportedly carrying strategic materials toward the Baltic. The train's codename, Eisenherz, appears only in a handful of decrypted Wehrmacht signals, each originating from the SS Main Economic and Administrative Office. On October 14th, the battalion established a forward camp near the Yartsevo rail junction. Locals reported seeing the soldiers, about 120 men, preparing demolitions along a secondary line that cut through a dense forest toward Vopitz. That night, a teleprinter intercept logged by the 3rd Belarusian Front Intelligence Section described Eisenherz as containing mobile research equipment and sensitive cargo under directive of SS Brigade Führer Klaus Weidmann. Weidmann, already on the NKVD's wanted list for his role in massacres in occupied Poland, was thought to be fleeing toward Königsberg. At 2:15 on October 15th, a Soviet forward observer signaled that Eisenherz had entered the forest sector. The last message from the 32nd Battalion followed 17 minutes later, a short, incomplete phrase, "light under steel," before contact was lost. At first light, an NKVD detachment advanced along the track to the reported interception point. They found no soldiers, no train, and no signs of combat. The only evidence was a single steel coupling, still warm to the touch despite the autumn frost, its surface scorched and bearing a faint magnetic pull strong enough to deflect a compass needle. In the days that followed, NKVD engineering teams combed the area, discovering a section of track that ended abruptly in a wall of undisturbed forest. No earthworks or camouflage nets were found, only the sudden absence of the line, as if the rails had never existed beyond that point. A field report dated October 20th mentions disorientation among personnel, erratic compass readings, and rapid depletion of flashlight batteries within the search zone. The Eisenherz name reappeared in Soviet counterintelligence files in February 1945, this time linked to a German convoy sighted in East Prussia, transporting what witnesses described as crates on shock-mounted frames, each attended by an armed SS officer. Whether this was the same cargo from the missing train remains speculative. No record of Weidmann's capture exists. He vanishes from post-war wanted lists without explanation. After the war, surviving veterans of the 3rd Belarusian Front occasionally spoke of the battalion that walked off the map. In 1962, a retired NKVD officer, interviewed privately in Leningrad, claimed that the forest where the train was last seen had been placed under restricted access for decades due to residual effects from an unknown source. He refused to elaborate, citing lingering political sensitivities. A partial copy of the Volga Index, KGB microfilms seized from OSS holdings in Vienna in 1947, contains photographic enlargements of the scorched coupling and field sketches of the track's abrupt termination. The annotations note possible experimental magnetic induction device and unidentified power source. No physical remnants of the train's rolling stock were ever recovered. Today, satellite imagery shows the forest canopy largely undisturbed, the railbed overgrown and invisible to casual inspection. Local hunters still avoid the area, claiming that animals behave erratically near the site and that compasses will spin without settling. Officially, the disappearance of the 32nd Battalion is listed as missing in action, presumed killed. Unofficially, the fate of Eisenherz and the men who tried to stop it remains a sealed chapter in a war already crowded with mysteries. In March 1961, a demolition crew dismantling the skeletal remains of a wartime Luftwaffe radio transmission tower outside Dresden uncovered a reinforced sublevel beneath the concrete foundation. According to Stasi technical unit logs, the chamber was accessed via a rusted blast door marked with the Luftwaffe Reichsadler and the year 1944. Inside, stacked on metal shelving, were sealed canisters of photographic negatives and a single filing cabinet, its contents locked under a steel hasp. The site was immediately cordoned off, and all civilian workers were dismissed without explanation. Within days, the material had been transferred under Directive 14B to Department M, the Stasi's most secretive technical intelligence branch. Only fragmentary descriptions of the negatives survive in surviving internal memos. One technician, later defecting to the West, recalled images of unmarked aircraft on tarmac fields with no identifiable insignia, save for one detail. Certain fuselages bore a hybrid emblem combining the Soviet Red Star with the German Bokenkreuz. The aircraft shapes themselves were unfamiliar, featuring swept wings and dorsal intakes that predated known designs by nearly a decade. Cross-referencing the negatives with wartime Luftwaffe station logs revealed no matching aircraft prototypes. Yet one photographic strip contained a background clue, a snow-dusted hangar bearing the name Flugplatz Kummersdorf Ost, a Luftwaffe research airfield abandoned in late 1944. Soviet archives confirm that Kummersdorf was occupied intact in April 1945, and that certain technical groups were flown in directly from Moscow before the main Red Army advance arrived. Defector testimony from former Soviet aviation engineer Viktor Lantsov adds a further layer. Lantsov claimed in a 1983 interview that from 1946 to 1948, he worked alongside German scientists in a closed facility outside Kazan, tasked with reconstructing a transitional interceptor based on designs seized from joint wartime laboratories. According to Lantsov, the program, codenamed Silberflug in German documents, was never intended for frontline deployment. Instead, it was an exchange, technology for political leverage between two ideologically opposed powers, conducted entirely off the public record. If true, Silberflug would indicate post-war cooperation between former Nazi engineers and Soviet military planners, an alliance hidden even from many within the Soviet military establishment. No official Soviet or East German record acknowledges such collaboration. Yet several missing persons cases from 1945 to 46 involve Luftwaffe engineers whose disappearance coincides with the known Soviet sweeps through occupied Germany's research sites. By the late 1960s, the negatives and files were believed destroyed in a Stasi archive fire. However, in 1992, following the dissolution of the East German state, a set of 12 35mm contact prints surfaced in Prague through an anonymous dealer. The images matched Lantsov's description exactly. Swept-wing interceptors under assembly in a hangar where Soviet and German personnel stood side by side. The dealer vanished before the provenance could be verified. The prints are now held in a private collection, inaccessible to public researchers. Dresden's former radio tower site remains undeveloped. Local residents speak of heavy nighttime activity there during the Cold War, convoys arriving under blackout, generators running until dawn, and strange metallic noises beneath the earth. Official planning documents list the land as unstable, unsuitable for construction. The blast door found in 1961 is gone, but the sublevel's location is still marked on certain obsolete Stasi facility maps, its purpose left undescribed. Operation Silberflug occupies no place in school histories or official war records. Yet in a handful of classified Western intelligence summaries, now partially declassified, a single note recurs: Joint Aeronautical Project, strategic significance unknown. No further pursuit authorized. It is as if both sides decided that certain wartime truths were too inconvenient to survive into the official narrative of the Cold War. The paper trails end, the witnesses are gone, and the ground itself swallows what it once held. But some echoes don't fade. They seep through rusted steel, through locked archives, through the quiet dread of those who know and will not speak. Listen long enough, and you'll hear it. History breathing where it shouldn't, waiting for the wrong hands to turn over the right stone.